Welcome to the Stop Ruining My Childhood podcast.
A sometimes nostalgic, sometimes cynical look back at pop culture.
Join us as we revisit movies, cartoons, and live-action TV of the 80s and 90s and ask the question...
Does this hold up, or did I just ruin my childhood?
My name is Megan.
And I'm Steve.
And today we have a very special bonus episode.
A listener request.
So on Facebook... we had David Bobke. Sorry, David, if I'm not saying your name correctly. And he said, got a request for you, the classic animated special, Cartoon All Stars to the Rescue. I remember what a big deal that thing was when it came out. And I kind of vaguely remembered it. Steve did not remember this at all.
No, not until, once we started watching it, I kind of remembered it.
It was like, yeah, because...
But, yeah, there wasn't much there.
As we'll get to in our fun facts and history section, this was on every single network the night that it aired, basically.
Yes.
And there was also a VHS and all of that. So we're going to get into that, and we're going to talk about the special and what we thought of it and how it's crazy that this thing was even made, quite frankly. But before that...
our non-sponsored snack review. And today's non-sponsored snack is wax bottles full of sugar juice.
Also known as Nickel Nips.
Nickel Nips. I never knew them as that.
Okay, so we've got red, orange, yellow, and green. Pick your poison.
Just hand me two of them.
All right.
So, for those of you listening, if you've never heard of Nickel Nips, which I never called them that as a child, they are basically wax bottles that are about 2.5 inches tall or so, and they're filled with colored juice. I say with air quotes. I'm assuming, and so they look like wax representations of Coke bottles almost, the old-fashioned kind. And what you do is you're supposed to bite off the top and then drink the juice, which is kind of sugar water, I believe.
Yeah.
And then you're supposed to chew the wax almost like gum, which I didn't know you were supposed to do that. I just did it that way as a kid.
Yeah, so I just had the unpleasant experience of eating mine while you were talking. These are called Nickel Nips because they cost a nickel and you nipped off the top. But it does sound like something dirty, so we'll just call them wax bottles. But these were created by a man named Vinnie Cavallo in the early part of the 1900s. I don't have an exact date, but according to snackhistory.com, and I will link it in case anybody wants to check my sources, I'll link it on our blog. These have been around since the Prohibition era, and they actually were not meant to be soda bottle shaped. They were meant to be in the shape of alcohol bottles. Kind of like whiskey or scotch, I guess.
Yeah, they do look like Coke bottles, but I could see that. I just had a lemon and a lime. And let me tell you, these are sublime.
No, they're awful.
They are one of my favorite things. You know what it is? If you listen to our last episode...
I was just going to say this.
You heard my take on Icy Pops. And this tastes just like Icy Pop juice.
That's what I thought. I couldn't do the second one when you're going to chew the wax while I talk. Okay. I couldn't do the second one. I had the red and the orange. Steve had the lemon and lime. The cherry was very strong and burned my throat a little bit, as very sugary things tend to do sometimes. But yeah, the liquor bottles, it was kind of a nod to the fact that people couldn't have real alcohol, kind of like candy cigarettes, but little wax bottles, which I thought was so fun because this is... the whole thing about Cartoon All Stars to the Rescue is to stay away from drugs and alcohol. But it is presented by McDonald's. So once again, we're swapping one addiction for another. Essentially, They're like, hey kids, stay away from things that are bad for your body, but also take these chicken nuggets.
Yeah. And also... and with our Nickel Nips, is that what you call them? Nickel
Nips, yeah.
It's like, kids, don't drink booze, but here's a lot of sugar.
And practice for when you have... they're about the size of those like little sample things you get in like airplanes.
Yes.
Or hotel mini bars.
Yes.
Right?
Did you chew the wax of yours?
I chewed it a little bit, but I needed to talk. So, at any rate, yeah, they've been made in the same shape since the 1940s. And they're made by Tootsie Roll, and they did have a resurgence in the 1980s. And what people think is that they look like soda bottles. Mm-hmm. And look, Coke and Pepsi have been around for a long time. But in the 80s, they really amped up their advertising.
Yeah.
Like, there are books written about the Coke Wars, right? The other Coke Wars. Not the Coke Wars we're talking about today.
Not in Colombia.
No.
But no.
But the Coke-Pepsi,
yep.
Feud. And also at this time, there was a resurgence of some other wax candy. Like, we haven't done yet, wax lips and wax,
yep.
fangs. So they had kind of a resurgence in the 80s. But yeah, they're still made by the Tootsie Roll Company. And they're still made using the exact same formula.
I don't believe that they're super easy to find still. I think I found these at we have a local toy store that's like an old-fashioned toy store, and they sell some old-fashioned type candies, and I think that's where we found these. But I do remember having these as a kid.
And you can get
them
and
I loved them just as much as I just loved them now.
Yeah, you can get them on Amazon. I didn't really eat these as a kid. Is this like a summer thing? It feels to me like a summer candy.
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, I lived in Texas, so every day was summer. But yeah.
That's true. I didn't think about that. I lived in Buffalo, so summer was like 2 weeks in July.
Yeah, so every day was almost winter.
Exactly. Or preparing for winter, or hoping the winter would not be as bad as the last winter. Yeah. So, out of 5, I did not enjoy this. I liked the ices. This to me is it's too concentrated.
Okay, so this is a first ever on our program.
Okay.
But for Cartoon All Stars, we're going to use stars.
Okay. I was going to go.
We've never used stars before.
I was going to go with propaganda.
No.
Out of 10 propaganda films. All right, so we always pick something related to what we're watching, and today we're going with stars. So, out of 5 stars, what are you going to rate the candy?
I will rate it 5 stars because it's delicious. It goes down smooth. It's engaging because you have to bite the top off to drink it, and then you can eat the entire packaging. I love this entire thing.
It is a fast candy, as we know.
It is a super fast candy.
You love fast candy. I got to go with a 1 on this. I can't even eat the second one. We are really far apart for the first time in a while.
I don't even know who you are anymore. If this is your stance on nickel nips.
The 5 years of marriage, and Steve finds out how I feel about wax bottles. I don't know that I've ever actually had one of these.
You just did.
I did not love it at all. I gave it a 1. All right, so.
Yeah. 3 out of 5. We need to do that again.
I can't do the math. I couldn't know if it was 2.5 or 3. So, 3.
No, it should be 2.5. You're right.
No, because it's 1 plus 5 divided by 2. It's 6. It's not 0. I didn't give it a 0.
You're right.
All right. I want to leave this in.
You should have an outtake.
All right. So.
Yeah. 3 out of 5 stars. For nickel nips.
Yeah, 3 out of 5 stars for nickel nips or wax bottles, whatever you call them where you are. They are hard to find, but I will link them in our blog because you can buy them online.
Awesome.
Steve, can you give us a brief summary? Because the cartoon isn't that long, and we're kind of going to go beat by beat.
So basically, the Cartoon All Stars: The Rescue, it's a brief cartoon, and it's about a kid named Corey who, when we pick up, is already smoking marijuana.
Right.
And we first find him stealing his sister's piggy bank and breaking it open to use the money to buy more drugs. And it's at that point that all of our favorite cartoons enter, and they take Corey on this basically little adventure to show him the harmful effects of drugs and how you can be addicted and how he's not in control of his life and how he should say no. And by the end of the story, he learns a lesson and he reunites with his little sister who he was being mean to. That's basically the story.
And then they decide they're going to go talk to mom and dad.
Yeah. And now, really, the big part of it, if you remember or don't remember, was the fact that when I say it has some of your favorite cartoon stars,
all of them.
It has Huey, Dewey, and Louie, the Smurfs, Muppet Babies, Alf, Garfield, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, the Chipmunks, Winnie the Pooh, Slimer from Ghostbusters, and Bugs Bunny and Daffy Duck.
And more. There are more in there that he's not even listing. Yeah, there are a ton of different characters, some from Warner Brothers and some from Disney, and
it was a collaboration.
Yeah, it was definitely a huge collaboration, which explains a lot of what happened.
So, Megan, tell us about the history. How did this come about, this montage, if you will, of cartoon anti-drug sentiment?
So basically, and we'll get into some of this in our memories, so I don't want to step too much into, like, the D.A.R.E program, but I do want to start there. Basically, what you have in the 1980s, this was done in 1990, and I forgot to mention you can watch it on YouTube. Mm-hmm. But in the 1980s, drugs did change. I want to say, too, there was a stereotype that this was just among the African-American population. It was not. And there is this, what they called basically an epidemic of crack. Now, some people today would say that that was a moral panic. And in the same way that we have other epidemics where we talk about, like, the obesity epidemic, and then all the politicians jump on board and they're like, oh no, this is a problem, what should we do? And what happened, like, I'll compare it to the obesity epidemic because I think it's a good comparison, is that it's hard to get adults to change their habits. So what happens then is you target kids. So if you look up, like, obesity epidemic, all the articles are about, like, childhood obesity and how we can solve this problem because people care about kids.
Right.
They don't really, because our laws kind of show that. But so what was happening here is that there's a crack problem primarily in urban areas, primarily among adults. Mm-hmm. And instead of kind of looking at real solutions, in my opinion at least, and also if you look at, again, some literature on the subject, real solutions as to why these people are using this drug, what effect it's having on them, how it really did rip apart. I mean, there's a great, and I'll link it in the blog, a great photo essay of crack in New York City, mm-hmm. and what that looked like. We talked about before in Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, right? The pre and post Giuliani era.
Yes, of New York City. Yeah, New York City was not great in the 80s.
Yeah, it really was a problem and causing a lot of harm. So they started having these drug awareness programs. One of the purposes of D.A.R.E, was like the whole Just Say No campaign. Mm-hmm. The real purpose of D.A.R.E was actually not just for kids to say no. It was for kids in schools to become accustomed to having a relationship with the officer that went in to talk to them.
Yes.
So that they would then not be as afraid or as standoffish or it was to have a better police community relationship.
Right.
So to me, that's actually the interesting part, and the thing that came out of D.A.R.E is that then a lot of kids felt more comfortable calling the cops, going to the cops for help. But the Just Say No part didn't really work as well.
Well, this was also in the midst of the Reagan administration, and now, when this came out in 1990, the George H.W. Bush administration had both committed to the war on drugs.
Yes.
And that's really where they were kind of focusing things, and this is incorporated it,
Right, so basically, this group of politicians is looking for a way to get the message out to kids, to prevent kids specifically from doing crack. And they also were looking at marijuana and alcohol as gateway drugs.
Right.
I never know how I feel about that, because I don't know many people who jumped just right into harder drugs before doing alcohol and marijuana, but it's not like they necessarily lead. Like, you know what I mean?
Right. Yep.
I don't know many people. I mean, I guess now with opioids it's a little bit different, but back when we were like in high school,
really what it is it's a behavioral issue, right? So it's not that people who drank alcohol or smoked marijuana doing that made you want harder drugs. But if you became accustomed to that behavior, you were a lot more apt to try another drug than someone who didn't at all.
And you're also with a crowd that's kind of doing those types of things. Yes. But I think that back then they did look at it like A will lead to B.
Yeah.
Right. So basically what happens is that there's all these like PSAs I called this our very special episode kind of as a joke because like a lot of sitcoms would have a very special episode.
Yeah,
right?
about drugs or
Saved by the Bell, Jessie was supposed to be on like speed.
On caffeine pills? Yes.
Well, she was on caffeine pills, but initially it was going to be like speed or cocaine.
You're right.
And they had her be on caffeine pills on Saved by the Bell. So they decide to make this special, and Roy E. Disney, who's running the Disney company at the time, he steps in to be a producer, and they work out with all of the other studios who own all the other characters to bring forward all the most popular cartoon characters at the time. The Real Ghostbusters.
Yep, Slimer. Steve mentioned Alvin and the Chipmunks, which we have reviewed on here before. Muppet Babies are in this, which was huge at the time. So Jim Henson had a piece of this. Winnie the Pooh had a show at the time, and he plays a very large role. You mentioned Huey, Dewey, and Louie. DuckTales was very big. Right. So The Smurfs was huge a couple years before that. So they really tried to take all of these beloved cartoon characters and basically form a half-hour propaganda film for kids. Yeah.
And what I mentioned already, but they needed funding.
Yeah.
So they go to McDonald's, and McDonald's basically sponsors the whole thing. So if you watch, which we'll link it for you, the version that there's one version from Disney where they had done a home video, and they have like 3 minutes of Disney, Marvel, Jim Henson Productions, like all of that. But the other version we watched had a long McDonald's commercial at the beginning. So it's kind of like it's advertising for McDonald's.
Right.
So they had this on because they felt it was so important, and they had the backing of the president. The president and the first lady do a short introduction to the home video.
And to the live, because they did the live one,
So they have a short introduction, and they put on this where it aired on NBC, ABC, and CBS, and I think maybe Fox as well. So the major networks all carried this at the same time. They preempted their programming for this special.
Yeah, it's like when you have like a presidential address.
Yeah.
And it's on every channel. That's what this was.
Yeah, exactly. And then, just in case people missed it that night, they also put out VHS tapes. And I think you could rent them for free? But it's like, who's renting this?
I'm going to be honest with you. I mean, as part of this is kind of in the field that I work now.
Yeah.
And if you're a kid's program at the time, right? You run like a daycare, or you run a school, or an after-school program, right? This might be the kind of tape you'd want that you could show the kids during if you were talking about drugs or something like that.
That's a good point, because I was just thinking of, like, my brother and I walking through Blockbuster, and I'm like, hey, let's
Cartoon All Stars to the rescue, and your mom being like, for the 7th time, Megan.
Well, the funny thing is that, in my opinion, it's not clear from the artwork what it's about.
Right.
So if you were a kid going through a video store, I'm pulling it up so you can...
Yeah, it just looks like all your favorite cartoons.
Yeah, with a curtain drawn, and they're all popping out.
It was the perfect medium, because if you want to reach kids, every kid was used to watching these characters on Saturday morning.
Right.
So now it was the same people you watch every Saturday morning are on a weeknight, which is pretty special if you're a kid.
That's true.
And they're all talking now. You're using that medium, so you're getting the kids' attention and talking to them about the dangers of drugs.
Yeah, and also the songs were done by Alan Menken and Howard Ashman, who worked for Disney, and also did the songs for The Little Mermaid, Beauty and the Beast, and Aladdin. So they had a whole real powerhouse behind this. They really, a couple people we didn't mention that as I'm looking at it now, I just said the Alf was in there, Daffy Duck, and Garfield.
Yep.
Garfield was also huge at the time, right? Big cartoon that we haven't covered yet, but we did talk about Alf.
Yeah.
So that's basically a little bit of the history. I think, given how many people are behind it, I don't want to like preview my review too much, but a lot of other people who have talked about this and talked about the history mention kind of what a wasted opportunity this was, because this is the first time since Who Framed Roger Rabbit that the studios are coming together to like put together.
You could really call this Animation Studios to the rescue.
Yeah, you really could. So that's some of our fun facts in history. We're going to take a break here, and when we come back, we'll get into our memories or really lack thereof, and then we'll do our full review.
Hey everyone, Nick here from the S1E1 podcast. Each week, we pick a different sitcom, watch just the first televised episode, and ignoring anything we may know about the future run of that series, decide if it's a show that we want to greenlight or cancel.
We very seriously dissect TV shows for no reason at all.
I gotta pee. Fucking old-timey. I got a Frankenstein at my show. So do I.
You should know, because right now you're dressed like a London DJ. Moving forward, unless there's anything else depressing about my life you want to bring up.
That's impressive to find that many bad shows.
Who's Boner? I don't even know what a Banksy is.
Catch us each week wherever you listen to podcasts, and visit us at s1e1pod.com for links to everywhere you can find us.
We're back. This is Megan.
And this is Steve.
Stay off drugs, kids. That's our PSA for today.
That's don't ruin your childhood to the rescue.
Yes, exactly. Don't ruin your childhood by doing drugs as an adult. I don't know. So, Steve, I know you don't really remember the movie. Do you remember D.A.R.E? Were you part of the D.A.R.E program?
Yeah, I remember the D.A.R.E program. That went on in my elementary school. I remember it vaguely. It's been a long time. But it was popular when I was growing up in the 80s, in elementary school especially, going into middle school. I also do remember, like I said, I didn't remember this initially, but while we were watching it, like pieces came back to me. I was like, oh yeah, I do remember this kind of. Like I remember that scene, or I remember, I remember this going on. And so I really did, I had seen it, probably when it was on.
Right.
I don't think that it was something that I watched is a rerun or anything, but yeah, I do recall it. I did probably sit down at night with parents or somebody because it was such a big deal.
Right.
Everyone knew about it, and then really, even if you didn't want to watch it, you didn't have a choice.
That's true.
Because most people didn't have a whole lot of cable at this point, and it was on every network.
Yeah, I remember the part with the toys coming to life and becoming the characters. And I really, beyond that, nothing.
I remember the drug smoke guy.
Yes,
the little villain that kept trying to sway him. Yeah, that's true.
So, with D.A.R.E, do you feel like D.A.R.E was effective for like you? I mean, you barely remember it, but did it?
Yeah, I thought so. I mean, I've always, to be honest, even in high school and things like that, I've always been kind of an anti-drug kid and an anti-drug adult.
Yeah.
And so I just. I was in, like yourself, I was in like some of the gifted classes and things like that growing up, and I just kind of saw the stupidity to it, right? Yeah. You're injuring yourself, and it's unnecessary, and I always kind of felt that way. But D.A.R.E was kind of a cool way to think of it, because they had like the black shirts and the red D.A.R.E, and the police officers came in and talked, right? And it was kind of neat because, especially in elementary school to kids, right? You have like police officers, firefighters. Those are cool, like people that are really neat to come in.
Yeah. So we had D.A.R.E for 3 years: 3rd grade, 4th grade, 5th grade. So you went through it for 3 years. I went to the first D.A.R.E thing in 3rd grade, and the officer, they were talking about like stranger danger, and the officer asked for a volunteer, and I volunteered, and he started following me, and I basically like ran. I started running. We're just in a classroom, and I started running, and he's like, all right. He goes, now Megan did the exact right thing there. She sped up when I was like, yeah, because you're following me. Like, I don't like that. I was like very suspicious. But what ended up happening, also that day, we had like a science lesson that went along with some of the D.A.R.E stuff.
Okay.
And they showed us pictures, full-on pictures of a regular lung and a smoker's lung.
Yes.
And I was like, I'm never smoking.
Yeah.
Like, based on those pictures, it freaked me out. And this one girl started crying because her dad was a heavy smoker. And she was like, that's what his lungs are going to look like and he's going to die. I mean, she's not wrong.
Right.
But it's like a way to scare our kids. So what ended up...
like scared straight.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what ended up happening is I was then in the Gifted and Talented program, which met the same day that D.A.R.E met.
Mm-hmm.
And I never went to another D.A.R.E thing again until 5th grade, when on a different day, they held the D.A.R.E graduation ceremony. And because everybody else had gone through, they just were like, you're graduating from D.A.R.E, Megan. And they gave me a black shirt with D.A.R.E on it. And I had never been except one time. And I just thought it was kind of funny. For me, I don't know. I think that it did what it was intended to do, of making you feel more comfortable around law enforcement. Mm-hmm. Because they can be very intimidating as a kid, right? But I also think a couple of times I have smoked marijuana and I found that my brain does not, my brain is too creative already. Like, so opening it up even more is not good. It's like, no bueno. It's not a good thing. It doesn't work for me. And the same thing with alcohol. With alcohol, when I drink, I feel like dumber, and I don't like that.
Right.
I don't like my brain being messed around with by substances.
Yes.
But the way that it's portrayed here is interesting to me because we never find out some of the reasons behind the behavior. And to me, that's the key. Right? Is there trauma? Are there mental health problems?
In the cartoon special, it alludes to that there wasn't any problems like that. It was peer pressure.
Right.
His friends kind of pushed it on him. And he didn't want to seem cowardly, and he wanted to be cool. And so, which did happen. I mean, not as much as I think some people think it. I think there was a lot of people trying to escape.
Yeah.
But there were some people who did get into it. Cigarette smoking was big like that.
Yeah.
Right? A lot of people smoked because it was cool in the 80s and because everybody on TV and movies smoked, right? And it was just a thing that people did.
Yeah, I think that with smoking and drinking, that does sometimes happen more. But the way that it's presented is that you're going to be at a party and somebody's going to come up to you and be like, hey, kid, do you want to drink something? Here's something to smoke. And here's some drugs. And that's not what... And when it actually happens in real life, your friend's just like, hey, Steve, want a beer? And you're like, all right. Like, you know.
I will say that it is, there is more to it than we think because it's not like some stranger in a park trying to hand you a joint, right?
Right.
But I don't know of anyone ever who started smoking marijuana by themselves. They just one day went, I'm going to go find some weed.
Right.
No, it was always a group of people were smoking
Yeah.
and they stepped in.
Yeah, that's true. And I will say I drank quite a bit my last year of high school and first year of college. And the reason for that was because I had social anxiety.
Right.
As I said, alcohol makes me feel a little dumber, but it makes me feel slower so that I didn't feel as nervous. And I know people who did it for that reason and then kind of got hooked on it.
Yeah.
And what happened to me basically is I was 20 and also I have allergies, so alcohol makes me quite sick. And I got sick and I was like, this isn't a problem, but it could be. Yeah. So I just stopped drinking. And it wasn't like, for me, it wasn't a big deal. But I think if you have some of those other components, genetics or, like I said, trauma, things like that. Yeah, so it's kind of interesting. It's just that propaganda takes those types of truths and then it has to condense them down into a palatable form,
right,
that then can be spread to the masses, and sometimes that's a hit and sometimes that's a miss.
Well, it's also because you have to be, you have to simplify things a little bit for when you're aiming at kids, a simpler concentrated form to get it out.
That's true, but at the same time, this is not that far away from Reefer Madness, if you've ever watched that, where in Reefer Madness is another propaganda movie where they smoke pot and they like get hyped up and they go crazy and that kind of thing. I will also say, as we get into the kind of recap of this, here's my question: who is this made for? Because I feel like it's aimed at younger kids to snitch on their older brothers and sisters.
The kids that they're focusing on, that they want to get this message, are kids who idolize their older brothers and sisters. So they look up to a 12 or 13-year-old, right? So showing him learning the lesson,
yes,
and then, changing his ways is a good way to kind of get that into the kids that are watching it, I think.
So we open with a very ordinary house in the suburbs.
Yep.
And I think that's kind of intentional to say this could be anybody's family, right?
And we see Corey's piggy bank being stolen.
Yes.
The door opens and hands come in and grab the piggy bank.
Well, but before that, we see she's got a Smurf comic, Kermit clock, Baby Kermit from Muppet Babies clock. She's got a Winnie the Pooh teddy bear. And then, so then...
Is there an elf poster?
I think so. And then a Garfield lamp. Oh, and a Chipmunks record.
Yes.
Yeah. So we have some of the cartoons that are going to come to the rescue, and her piggy bank gets stolen.
So her piggy bank gets stolen, and the first thing that happens is all these cartoon characters come to life off of the different merchandise in her room. And the Smurfs, in the Smurf comic book, the Smurfs go and wake up Papa Smurf to say Corey's piggy bank has been stolen. And this is my first thing. Why does Papa Smurf sleep in a shirt but takes it off for the day?
It's cold.
Because then he just wears pants with no shirt.
It's chilly time. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. And they're like, Papa Smurf is smurfing soundly. I love it. We haven't done the Smurfs yet, but one of my favorite things about the Smurfs is that Smurf is a verb for anything.
For everything.
For everything. Yeah, so all the stuff starts to come to life. What I did find funny, so here's my highlight about this part. I did like, it is kind of a merchandise push, because that they actually did have, like, posters of Alf and Garfield lamps.
If I saw
phones.
one more Garfield phone or lamp or clock in the 80s, like, I don't know what I would have done.
I wanted a Garfield phone so bad.
You weren't that cool, were you?
No, and I didn't. Well, the girl I knew who had one had her own separate line. Yeah. Which, why do you need that when you're in, like, 4th grade?
We had a separate line in the basement for the kids. And we got it. It was like when I was probably 12 or 13. And my next brother would have been 9 or 10 by that point. So it was to the point where in school we started making friends who would call.
Yeah.
And my parents were like, they were sick of it tying up the line. So we had that phone that we could make phone calls.
We didn't even have a separate line for, like, internet when I was in high school. But anyway, so I did like how they all kind of came to life. Then my favorite part is that Steve and I were watching this, and everything is something in her room at this point. Now, later, other characters come in.
Yes.
But all of a sudden, out of nowhere, Slimer comes through the wall. And I'm like, would she have a ghost in her room? Like, where is Slimer coming from? It was so funny. But yeah, it's kind of neat the way that happened. So we have...
So as they wake up, they end up waking her up unintentionally.
Right.
And she sees her bank is gone. So she goes down the hall to her brother's room, opens the door to find her brother just broke her bank open and is collecting all the change.
Yeah, and
to buy drugs.
At this point, it's not clear whether Corey can see all these characters that have come to life to help her out. She sees his drug box.
Yes.
He says it's a chemistry experiment.
Yeah, to mind her own business, and he yells at her as he's pocketing her change. Now, my thought here was, Michael breaks the bank open to buy drugs, right?
Yeah.
But he has a whole box of drugs under the... Why does he need more drugs? He hasn't used the ones he's got. Like, you know what? There's little kids in Ethiopia that don't have any drugs. And you're not using yours.
Yeah, I mean, the idea is that he's supposed to give money to his friends, though.
Right.
So does he owe them money for the drugs he already has?
Maybe.
Or is it because they're about to go and score something new? Because that does come up. That is
true.
Yeah. So, anyway, one of the characters says, he's got a one-way ticket to Nowheresville. And then there's a smoke monster hanging out with his delinquent friends.
Yeah, and also him. We meet the smoke monster kind of comes out of the drug box.
Yes.
And she's like, what are you doing, Michael? And the cartoon characters are like, this is no good. And the smoke monster that's supposed to be, I guess, marijuana smoke,
Right.
And he's like, don't listen to him, man. We're cool. And he's like, he's kind of like the devil on Michael's shoulder.
And he's drawn, I have to tell you this, he's drawn very similar to later on in the Disney movie Hercules, how they represent Hades.
Oh, yeah.
Like, he's true. Very similar
Some of the face,
vibe.
yeah.
And so I'm going to tell you as you guys are listening, we are describing this, and it is only going to get crazier from here, okay? This whole thing is like somebody took acid and came up with this movie about not doing drugs.
Yeah, let's take some drugs so we can come up with a no-drugs movie.
Because what happens next is that Bugs Bunny comes out dressed as a cop, and he fights the smoke monster.
Yeah, he chases down Michael. Michael sees a silhouette and goes, oh my gosh, it's the cops.
Yeah.
Right? They've come after me coming out of my house. Right? Which I don't know how he thinks the cops know he has drugs. But, so he runs down an alleyway and it ends up being Bugs Bunny in a police outfit.
Well, because that's what Bugs Bunny does. He's a trickster,
that's what he does. He's a trickster.
So he scares Michael because this is a movie about fear tactics.
Right.
And then he tries to put a lid on the smoke monster. And then I did think was good. He says, what's the big attraction? How'd you even get started? And Michael says, 'cause I wanted to. And then they take a time machine.
Yeah. He goes, are you sure about that? And they take a time machine back to when he first tried it, and he gets to watch himself, and it really wasn't his idea. His friends were like, come on, man, try some. What are you, chicken?
Yeah, because that's how that works. So we cut to Corey and her mom, and they have the same haircut. They're basically like, Corey's like a little mini-me of her mom.
Right.
And Corey... and as I'm saying this, I forgot to say this in my memories. I know I watched this because I have a friend who's a girl named Corey, and we kind of made fun of her for a while after this came out. I just forgot about that till just now. But she basically has an opportunity to tell about the bank and chooses not to.
Yes.
And she wants to kind of protect her brother. Meanwhile, kind of like Michael has this smoke monster devil on his shoulder, Pooh is whispering in Corey's ear, telling her to snitch.
Yeah, and she's like, snitches get stitches.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? She's not going to rat her brother out, but Pooh's like, you know what? Just do it. Like, he needs to get figured out. Pooh, I was like, come on, Pooh. Get with the program here.
Yeah. So, and also, you have a honey addiction, Pooh. Don't even start with me.
Yeah, don't start. Yeah. This is like the kettle calling the pot black,
yeah,
Pooh.
Exactly. So... the past is in black and white. We go back in time with Bugs and Michael. And what I love is that now here, I really actually did like that they drew Michael younger.
Yeah,
like,
not much younger, but he's supposed to be like maybe a year or two younger.
Yeah, but he's a little bit shorter, a little bit skinnier. It would have been really easy to skimp on the animation, but listen, McDonald's is footing the bill. We're going to go all
That's
out
right.
for this.
This is McNugget money, baby.
Exactly. This is Happy Meal. So...
McDonald's, if you're out there, we're open to sponsorship.
Yeah, definitely. We enjoyed that Happy Meal, I'm not going to lie. So anyway, Michael says to them, what are you guys, trying to get lung cancer? So he's kind of making fun of them for smoking.
Yeah.
And then they're like, no, this isn't cigarettes. These are marijuana joints. Come over and have some.
Yeah.
And he's like, I didn't want to feel like I was a wimp. Bugs is like, believe in yourself, Michael. You don't need drugs.
Yeah.
And the smoke monster's like, but drugs feel good.
Yeah.
Like,
so then it flash forwards to now, and it's the same group of friends, and he goes over to smoke some weed.
A little bit older.
Yeah, goes over to smoke some weed with him, and they're like, no, try some crack.
Yes.
And they've got crystals of crack, and I'm like, wait a second.
Here's the point.
Where did a bunch of 13-year-old kids get crack?
I turn to Steve and I go, that escalated quickly.
Yeah.
Kids living in the suburbs who are still just out of middle school, where are you getting crack? We should have done rock candy for our snack today. For some reason they offer him crack. Now, at this point, there's a girl in like a hipster hat, or well, at that point it would have been like a Blossom hat.
Yeah.
And she steals his wallet to go buy some crack. Which is funny. He's chasing her and he falls in I can't even describe this movie.
He falls into the manhole cover, and that's where he's confronted by Michelangelo from the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
But to me, what's hilarious, I can't do it. To me, what's hilarious about this is that some of the cartoon characters seem to be like almost figments of his imagination, right? Like the smoke monster is representing that addiction or the call to drugs. And Bugs is fighting that, and he's kind of like the angel on the shoulder, right? And then some of them are like things coming to life, like this. But then Michelangelo just exists in this world.
He's just here.
It's just a world in which Michelangelo and Slimer just exist.
And he's just like, dude, why are you don't want to be doing drugs. Drugs are bad for you.
Oh, my God.
And I was like, way to go, Michelangelo, because as we know from our review of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, I'm a big fan of theirs. But I was a little confused because it was my understanding to this point that Michelangelo was a party dude.
But you can party without drugs. That's why it's Michelangelo.
That's a good point.
And not Master Splinter.
Yeah. Michelangelo's a soft party dude.
Yeah.
Much like how he had to give his nunchucks away for a grapple hook.
Exactly. If you don't know what we're talking about, go back and listen to that episode. So here's where it gets even crazier, because Michelangelo pushes him down a drain further past the sewers. He gets into an indoor roller coaster, and who's waiting for him but Kermit and Miss Piggy from the Muppet Babies?
Yeah.
And Piggy says, "This is a romantic tunnel of love." And Kermit's like, "No, it's not."
Kermit's like, "We're here to talk about drugs, Piggy."
Get your head in the game.
Yeah.
So at this point, it reminds me of Being John Malkovich, because we're inside Michael's addicted brain.
Right.
This is your brain on drugs, but without the fried egg.
And of course, if you've seen our Muppet Babies review, if not, stop now, go watch it, come back. But if you've seen our Muppet Babies review, you know the Muppet Babies always had songs and things going on.
Yeah.
And so they used this opportunity to introduce the song, "There's a Million Ways to Say No."
So here is my biggest issue with it. Okay. Out of all the crazy things, I'm willing to put up with some crazy stuff because it's the 80s and a lot of those cartoons were nuts. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, just the name. We're used to it. But if you think about that name, it's mind-boggling, right? My issue with the song, this is my beef with this PSA, is that there's only one and it comes at the wrong time. Because if you're going to have a big number like this, it should be the climax of the film or the story. And it should act like your turning point, right? So either have it be a real turning point where he starts to turn around and see things differently, or have it be at the highest point of tension and it breaks the tension and then there's a resolution.
Right.
They don't do either one. It's a very catchy song, and all of a sudden also, all of these other cartoon characters we haven't even seen. Tigger comes out, like they're the Huey, Dewey, and Louie come out.
Yeah, Gonzo.
Right? Gonzo's there. There's all these other characters we haven't even seen, and then he's like, "Well, I don't know. Parents aren't really helpful, and I'm just my friend. They're my friends, and I'm just gonna keep doing drugs."
Yeah.
There's no turning point. There's
the
no
Muppet Babies are
turnaround.
like, "What? We just did a whole number. Come on, kid."
And all of the cartoon friends actually came to the rescue to sing this for you. Now, if they had a small song here, and then the big closing number at the end, like you should have in a musical, like that would have made more sense. But the structure of it just didn't make sense. Then Corey wants to be like her brother.
Well, Corey goes into the room and finds the drug box.
Right.
And the smoke monster comes out and tries to lure Corey into doing some drugs.
And as you said, there's nobody else there.
Yeah.
So
she sees the drug monster now?
I learned it from watching you. That's true. That's what the message is.
Yeah.
So we just had other PSAs, this is your brain on drugs, and they fried the egg and then said any questions.
True.
We see Michael's brain on drugs, right?
Yeah.
And
we
then
get Just Say No from the song.
We get Just Say No from the song, and then hear that famous thing of like, where'd you learn how to do this? Who taught you this? And the kid says to his dad, "I learned it from watching you." Which
here it is.
There it is. So, so at the same time, there's like this nightmare scene where they're running up a roller coaster, and then it turns into water rapids. Tigger gives him a floaty. There's a pinball machine. Daffy Duck is a fortune teller.
It's very psychedelic.
It's very, again, yes, it's very psychedelic. Yeah. And it reminded me of Pink Elephants on Parade from Dumbo.
Yeah.
Which is a scene I hate for the same reason, that it's just really weird. Then they show like his future. They have a little joke. I did like this joke. Daffy Duck looks in and he goes, "Oh, your future's very dark." And Michael goes, "That's a bowling ball."
Yeah, because he's looking at the crystal ball, but it's a bowling ball, yes.
Then he brings out a crystal ball, and basically Michael is a zombie twitching on a bed, presumably from the crack. He's gotten hooked on crack.
I would imagine so, yeah.
And each one of them starts to tell him how great he is without drugs, and then they show what's happening with Corey, and he says, "I was a dope," which is a great pun.
Because he was on dope.
Because he was on dope. He's a dope for doing dope. So he rushes home. He's able to stop Corey from doing the drugs. They get rid of the drugs. And then she says, "Maybe it's time to talk to Mom and Dad." And they're like, "Yeah." And he kicks out the smoke monster. And then the smoke monster, in what can only be described as a push for a sequel, the smoke monster's like, "You can't get rid of me. I'll be back." And he like floats away with a garbage truck.
Yes.
And then Mike says to Corey, "He's right, he will try to come back." What?
That's addiction. That's the nature of it.
I know it's the nature. Well, that's part of, I guess that's what they're trying to say. But this is a kid who's 12 years old, and he's like, I do think they were pushing for a sequel. Legitimately, I think that that's what they were going for. I think that they thought, like, this is going to be a hit and kids are going to love it. They're going to turn around and they'll stop doing drugs. Everybody will, like the Frozen song, everybody will be singing There's a Million Ways to Say No.
Yeah.
And we will have a sequel to this that McDonald's will also pay for. And if they don't, we'll go to Burger King.
That's right.
That's what I think they thought would happen. So they go and talk to their parents, and then we have another commercial for McDonald's, which they actually push the McDonald's charity, and they sing "Love
the Ronald
Lifted
McDonald
Me."
House.
I actually know somebody who really was helped by the Ronald McDonald House, like quite a lot, and it's actually a charity that we've been making fun of McDonald's, but their charity is really
so do I.
helpful.
I know a family that was helped actually as well, and it is excellent. And they sing "Love Lifted Me," which is the Ronald McDonald commercial. I think you might be onto something, that they thought it was going to be a sequel, maybe.
Yeah.
And they're like, even if it doesn't work out, and then their sequel comes around, and it's like sponsored by Taco Bell, and it's like, cartoon kind of stars to the rescue.
It's all the B-list.
It's all Hanna-Barbera, right?
It's Yogi Bear instead of Winnie the Pooh.
Yeah, Grape Ape, right? It's just like, Kung Fu
Panda?
No, the Kung Fu Dog.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
And like, maybe Scooby-Doo is the star,
headliner.
But they don't get him, they just get Velma. Like, they don't get Scooby or Shaggy.
They have Scrappy.
Scrappy-Doo. Oh, my goodness.
The poor man Scooby.
Oh, gosh.
So let's talk a little bit about reception.
Okay.
All right. Now, there wasn't ratings for this necessarily because it was on every network.
Right.
Right? As we mentioned, it aired April 21st, 1990 on every American network pretty much in the United States. It aired in Canada a couple weeks later where they just cut out the president and put the prime minister in, doing an intro as well.
Okay.
And then in November of 1990, it aired in Australia. And in December of 1990, it aired in New Zealand, all with their prime ministers introducing it.
This thing did a world tour.
So it obviously was a little bit more received than we remember.
I don't know.
Because it was seen in 4 different countries.
I don't know. And then what my picture is I'm sure, look, drugs are everywhere, but, and I know we have listeners in this country, but are they, like, did they have crack in New Zealand? Like, I think of New Zealand as being very pastoral.
Yeah.
With, like, a lot of sheep.
There was marijuana as well.
Yeah,
and there
I
was
guess.
a lot of other stuff that you could really, this is a universal drug
I mean, in
prevention.
some ways it is, but I think it very clearly is targeting, like, let's keep the kids off crack.
Right.
And essentially what happened with crack is that kids did not gravitate toward it because they saw how tweaked out, like, they saw the effects of it.
Right.
And they gravitated toward other drugs, but there was very little, I think, desire to be on crack. So at any rate, I don't know that I can rate this out of stars.
So let's rate this. We're rating it out of stars. 10 stars. What's your rating for Cartoon All Stars to the rescue?
I have never been so perplexed about anything in my life. I don't even know how that I would think about rating this, because the question is, does it hold up? Like, that's one of the, basically when we rate, we ask two questions. Did I personally like it? Right? And that's number one. And number two, does it hold up? It does not hold up at all. Did I personally like it in a weird, ironic way? I guess maybe a little bit, because the cartoon characters are who they are. Oh, I forgot to mention, too, Garfield only cares about lasagna. He does not care about helping Michael at all.
No.
Everywhere they go, he asks about food.
The sequel was supposed to be Pooh in Garfield's interventions.
Right.
They're like, all right, now that we've helped Michael with his crack and his marijuana, Pooh, we need to talk about honey, and Garfield, you've got a serious lasagna problem.
And let me introduce you to the good people at OA, Overeaters Anonymous. So I guess if I'm going to rate it, I guess I would rate it in terms of PSAs. Okay. Mm-hmm. If I think about PSAs, to me, this is actually, even given its length, it's not that memorable of a PSA.
Okay.
Because PSAs work best in short little bites where you don't have to actually, like, propaganda works when you don't have to think about it.
Right.
Right? So I think in terms of that, it's not that effective. When we break it down, you can see that they actually were trying to say, why are kids doing this? To a certain extent, I mean, limited, but to a certain extent. And it really is also aimed at those younger kids to scare them, but to say, if you see something, say something. Right. Like, we're calling it snitching, but that's kind of what it's about, right? I don't know, though.
So what do you rate it?
I don't know.
You got to give it something.
I would give it a 1 if it were like the lesser cartoon characters. Because it's such beloved cartoon characters, I guess I will go... I go with a 2. It's not structured well. It's not doing what it's meant to do. It's a crazy ride.
Okay.
So 2 stars out of 10 for Megan.
2 for you. You and I are way off today. We're off on snack and we're off on show.
Liked this?
It wasn't. I mean, it's not phenomenal, right? But it has some of my favorite cartoons: Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Slimer from the Real Ghostbusters. Right? It's got the Smurfs, the Muppet Babies. Right? It was cool like that. But also, now, was it well executed? No. But I respect the effort.
What?
I respect the idea of trying to keep kids away from drugs.
Oh, man.
Okay? I respect the fact that a lot of competing companies got together to do this. That they worked with the president. They put it on for a whole night for people. And so, was it executed well? No. But I think I at least respect the fact that they tried. Okay?
Well, yeah.
And because of that, I'm going to give it a 6.
Okay. I will say, I'm not changing my rating, but I will say that I think there is something to... We live in a time right now where everything is very much about bipartisan politics, right?
Oh, yeah.
Like, everything is very, very divided in an unhealthy way that we saw right before the Civil War, quite frankly.
And we live in a time of propaganda that makes this look like Saturday morning cartoons.
Because it's done well.
Right. There's propaganda, so much propaganda today from both sides. That this looks very, pale. And
right. Yeah. And a lot of that's not even coming from politics. It's like coming from media companies that associate with one side or the other.
Right.
So it is interesting to me that you're right. A lot of people came together to do a joint effort, and I wish that there were more of that. I think that if we had more centrists and reasonableists and people who tried to look at the nuances of things and come up with solutions. I don't think this is a good solution at all, but they did try.
I mean, I don't think anybody's going to look at it and go, telling kids not to do drugs is a terrible idea. Right? It's a good thought, right?
It is a good thought.
Right? No one's going to say, "No, you should let those kids smoke weed," right? They're 9. No, that's a terrible idea. Right? And so let them have some crack. No, terrible. Right? So that's why I do it that. So 4 stars out of 10.
Out of 10.
For Cartoon All Stars to the rescue. Thank you. As always, I always mention that we'll take listener requests, and we did. And we've tried to turn it over fairly quickly.
Yeah, we did actually. I liked this suggestion. We initially were going to have our bonus episode be for Top Gun.
Yeah.
But just the way that this laid out, so you're probably hearing this on a Thursday. Mm-hmm. We just did Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. We're going to do Quantum Leap, which is our normal episode, and that will come likely on the following Tuesday. We already picked the episodes for Quantum Leap, and we already know the movie, which is Field of Dreams. So that's what's coming up. We don't have any What Is Steve Willing to Watch, but send in your other suggestions. We can't always get them in so quickly like we did with this, but this was a quick watch. We didn't have to go through like 4 hours of TV.
Yeah, this was about 38, 39 minutes?
Yeah, something like that. And that was with the intro and the McDonald's song and all of that. So, if you want to enjoy it, you can see it on our blog. It's on our Watch With Us page at stopruiningmychildhood.com. And until then, my name is Megan.
And I'm Steve.
Stay off drugs and have a great week. Thanks, everybody. This podcast is supported by its creators.
And listeners like you.
Help keep our show ad-free by visiting our website, stopruiningmychildhood.com.
There you can find links to our social media.
And this very podcast you're currently listening to.
Both Megan and I are authors, and you can find links to our books on our About page.
And on our Watch With Us page, you can find videos and links for all the shows and movies we discuss on the podcast.
And more importantly, links to buy the nostalgic snacks we review as well.
We also post bonus content about once a month.
So like, subscribe, and follow.
For a small independent podcast like ours, it really does make a difference. Thanks.